We want to go back to some of our reporting over the last few days just regarding the chaos in the different parts of the country in the Jubilee grassroots elections. This is why our top story a few days ago was this, and you see the chaos quite clearly in this clip that I'm going to play for you. And it's the genesis of our conversation tonight. I want to bring this to your attention right now. Do you know, just guys play that so everybody knows what I'm talking about? In Embu, in Nakuru, in Samburu, and in Mombasa, we saw also similar scenes. I want to just play all of those for you back to back.
The two accused the senator of bringing in fake aspirants to try and influence the vote. In Nakuru County, police had to lob tear gas to disperse a rowdy crowd, which was chanting slogans against one of the Jubilee officials leading the exercise.
The mess that has characterized Jubilee interim official selection continues to play out as the clamor for leadership takes shape. In Samburu County, it turned bloody. A woman was badly injured on the head as supporters of Samburu West MP Lati Lelelit and Samburu women rep Maisom Leshomo clashed.
Barely an hour into the session, the chaos started. Supporters of one of those aspiring to head the Jubilee party in Mombasa started throwing tantrums and insisted that the process was over. Some claimed that they had been unfairly left out of the voting process. Former TNA Secretary General Onyango Olo, who had come to officiate the elections, was forced to flee for safety to escape from the irate crowd.
The head of the Jubilee Party Secretariat, Raphael Tuju, is now with us. Thank you so much for coming in this evening.
Thank you.
When you look at all of that violence across your grassroots elections, what happened?
Well, what we looked at so far is 40 counties. Out of those, as you have named them, we had 4 areas in which we had serious problems, if you want to call them serious. That is, in 36 out of 40 counties, we had fairly successful events. 36 out of 40 is 90%. You can give me C- if you want.
Is C- good enough for you?
Well, 90 out of 100, you want to give it C-, you can give it C-, but I think we went on very well.
The court leader Raila Odinga has criticized the violent elections.
Who?
Raila Odinga.
You're not serious. You're surprising me, because what I know that in Homa Bay, in October last year, 4 people were killed. In our process throughout the week, we had 1 injury of 2 ladies who fought somewhere in Nyahururu, and that was it.
So you had...
So I mean, I'm shocked that he's even talked about that, because in Madari Valley, Madari constituency, 2 MCAs were having a difference. One, Patrick Owur, moved from one camp to the next camp. He was 22 years of age. He was killed. He's buried somewhere in Ugenya, Sigomre. I happen to know him because he's a relative. So I think that ODM has no moral ground, no platform to stand on to talk about violence. Chaotic, yes, but violent, no.
So your argument is that ODM has no moral ground to talk about chaotic elections because they have more chaotic elections?
No, they don't have chaotic elections. They have murderous and violent elections. There's a big difference.
Isn't that a nice way to wash over the fact that you had 4 major counties have violent, chaotic elections?
4 out of how many? 4 out of 47. I don't think that's a bad.
But you can't wish away
not
the foot.
Bad.
What does it say about? What does it say about democracy, though? That this is a party, the president's party, the deputy president's party, that has this kind of grassroots elections.
Some passion is expected. In fact, I was laughing at the Embu group when they came. They carried some rice and they actually threw it on the stage where I was. And I laughed at them. I told them I'm used to stones and petrol bombs in party affairs. So really, I think not bad, not bad at all.
If this is just the election of interim officials, the nominations in April, your own members now fear that they may not be free and fair. What do you think will happen at the election stage?
Well, one of the things that I must assure the members of the party is that these officials that we are putting in place at the counties have twin objectives. There are twin objectives. One, of course, is to be able to comply with the requirements of the Political Parties Act. And the other one is so that at least we have our people on the ground, people we can talk with from the headquarters. But they're going to have absolutely nothing to do with the nomination process. In our constitution, we have the National Election Board, and the Constitution of Kenya now requires that the IEBC responds to our request to them, which we have put in writing, that they will be involved in our nomination process.
People are concerned about internal party democracy. If this is what the interim elections look like, what does it say about your internal party democracy?
This was not even an interim election. This was really a consensus building exercise. And I can say once again, out of the 40 that we have looked at so far, and you have mentioned them, all of them, you had 4 problems, 4 areas where there are problems. 36 out of 40, that's 90%, that's 10% problem, 90% okay.
But like we just said, members of your own party fear that it may not be free or fair when the nominations come in April.
I think that's a very valid fear, because in the past there have always been problems in terms of fairness in the nomination, especially in the big parties. So I think what we've put in place is to ensure that our National Election Board and the IEBC should act independently, should act professionally, and not even I will be involved in the nomination process.
You're not a stranger to violence in elections. When you were running for president, you had instances where you were pelted with stones and stuff like this. Now this is happening in your party.
Not pelted with stones. My windscreens were broken. Have you seen any windscreen broken in the Jubilee party nomination, party consensus building process? Zero.
You're spinning this away from the fact
Zero.
that this is the same thing you criticized when you ran for president, but when you ran away from Raila Odinga's party. Yeah. Now it's happening in your own party.
No. Zero windscreen broken. 0 deaths. When on the other side, in just one county, we had 4 deaths. That's fact. Google. Just Google Migori party electoral process, and you'll have 4 there indicated, reported by the nation newspapers itself.
You can't criticize ODM's own chaotic or violent elections, as you rightly point, when you have also within your own a chaotic consensus building, as you're calling it, which means there's a culture of violence in party politics generally in Kenya.
In 10% of the places where we went, there was the chaotic scenes that you've taken. Unfortunately, if you came to Moranga, Governor area, and Jamlek, who are supposed to be really very confrontational candidates, they walked out of the place shaking hands and laughing. Your media people were there. I never saw that footage.
Does this undermine the principle of democracy and party politics?
I don't even understand what you're saying.
Because you're trying to deny. You're trying to deny.
I'm not denying. I'm denying. I'm saying that in the 10% of the cases that you've even counted 4 out of 36. 4 out of 40. That means in 36 places we didn't have such serious challenges.
You're trying to deny the existence of a culture of chaos in party politics in Kenya, and it's no longer just an ODM or CORD problem. It's also a Jubilee problem.
If you say that there's a culture of chaos,
yes.
I must say that that is what we witnessed in those particular areas, and it is unfortunate. And we're going to have very serious sanctions against, especially those leaders who attempted to storm certain places. If you look at what is happening in Nakuru, the crowd which was being chased away were outside the hall. Inside the hall, we didn't have any issues, but those who are ferried by certain political actors were outside the hall. If you go to Mombasa, truth be told, one of the ODM big wigs in Mombasa transported people to come and storm into the hall.
Okay. Hold that thought for a moment, because I want to play Honorable Johnson Sakaja's statement and your own words to you just right now.
Okay.
The patent for violence is not Jubilee's. I think Kenyans know who owns the patent for violence in political parties. Let them not infect us with that. Let us remain as we have been before.
Ingia hapa tungeambiwa wangapi watakatwa, kila mtu hapo hivi amebeba mawe. Hivi sasa leo nimeingia bila helmet. I'm a very happy man. Thank you very much.
Do you consider that an appropriate response to chaos in your own party?
Quite interesting, but I don't understand you. First of all, you can talk about chaotic, you can talk about people shouting, but violence, I'm not able to attribute this to what I've seen. We had situations in which there was chaotic situation, but you know, I'm admitting, quite honestly, I'm admitting that in those places that you have mentioned, Nakuru, Mombasa, and a few others that you may have mentioned, we had problems. We had a challenge, for example, in Narok, which you have not mentioned, and we called it off. And we said we're going to go through that process again. But to equate what has happened in the Jubilee process with what happens in some of the other parties, I think it's like they are...
In Marsabit, 2 independent elections took part, and it was eventually called off. But your entire argument in all of this seems to be that we're bad, but we're not as bad as ODM. Not responding to what happened, just saying ODM is much worse.
Well, those are your words, eh? But I've just said,
I'm paraphrasing what you've been saying and what the Honorable Sakar just said.
Those are your words. Those are your words. And the thing is that what we have looked at is 40 counties. And those 40 counties, we had problems in 4 places. And I've just told you, you do your math, that is 90% success rate. I would like to have 100%. Unfortunately, we did not achieve the 100%.
So this is not 90%, this is not an exam mark. This is a case of disputed elections, disputed officials, where some within do not feel that it was a fair process, that it was free, and it should have been what the party stands for.
That's fair enough. We have established a mechanism at the head office where those who are not happy, they are able to file their protests. And if we think that there's merit in their argument, in their protests, in their petition, we'll look at those again. And I've actually established a specific independent group of 4 who are looking at those.
All right, I want to move away from this for a moment and bring in a soundbite from President Kenyatta speaking about the wider issues here.
Chama ya Jubilee, chama ya Wakenya wote, chama ya jamii zote, chama ambacho kitaongozwa na misingi ya maendeleo, chama ambacho kitaongozwa na sera, sio ukabila.
Your critics say Jubilee is a 2-community party. It's not a national party.
Well, to be honest with you, when Jubilee was essentially formed, we have to accept that it was essentially from the Rift Valley and Central. Now, for me, is one of the biggest celebrations in the whole thing, because the 2 communities, the Kalenjin community and the Kikuyu community, have had a very, very difficult relationships in the political arena in the last several years. For those communities to be able to come together and forge a political alliance in 2013 is one of the biggest political achievements in this country. As far as I'm concerned, that's a platform on which we can build. Because if those 2 communities could actually work together, then for me it gives me great hope that there is hope that other Kenyans can actually work across the ethnic divide.
The other criticism is that it remains a 2-community party, but having people like you at the head means you become a ceremonial head, and it makes the party look like it's got a national outlook when that is not the case.
I think, again, it's a catch-22. When I was invited to go and head the Secretariat, I would have said, no, my tribesmen are not there, so I'm not going to come. But what Jubilee is doing is that we are welcoming everybody to come on board. There are people from other communities, some I was even talking to them just as I was on my way here, who want to come on board. You have to start building the boat from somewhere. The boat, they started building it to their credit, you know, President Kenyatta and Deputy President Uhuru, to their credit, they brought those communities together. I think it is time for other communities now to come on board. And what I'm saying as head of Secretariat, welcome on board. It doesn't matter which community you are. We will create room for you.
There's a lot of controversy regarding the election itself, especially regarding the interim, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, the IEBC. We've just been covering that on tonight's broadcast, and there's disagreements between Jubilee and CORD on what the IEBC should be and how it should be constituted.
You want me to comment on that?
I want to play sound first before we do that.
Good.
All right, we don't appear to have it at the moment, but you're reading from very different scripts, as Jubilee and as CORD, regarding the IEBC, and you saw our extensive coverage on this broadcast. Can it happen? Can you have an election when the two major parties don't see eye to eye on such an important issue as the electoral body, the body that will carry out the election?
Well, I think on the issue of IEBC, I think CORD has an advantage, because when they're unhappy about something, they can go to the streets and demonstrate. The Jubilee side cannot do that.
Why not?
For example, recently when there was this very, very terrible deadline of compliance with the financial requirements on 8th of December, as a party, we protested, we contacted them, we told them we need the regulations, which should have been passed through Parliament before we can comply. They put up those regulations 24 hours before the deadline. And we tried our best to comply, and the president also complied, and we actually submitted the president's, whatever was required of the president to do as a candidate, much as we protested. Of course, CORD and the other parties, they can call press conferences and they can threaten IEBC with, demonstrations. But as far as we are concerned, we can only protest, and if we have anything to say about it, we can only do it through Parliament.
Why has the narrative become a Jubilee versus CORD in every political issue, as opposed to what each side is offering the citizens?
Well, that's the nature of politics. I think if you look at the politics in the United States, it was essentially an issue between the Democrats and the Republicans. There's nothing really, exceptional about that. There were other parties and there were other issues, but at the end of the day, it became really a contest between the two major parties and the two candidates of the major parties. So I think there's really nothing strange about that. But just to go back to the whole issue of the IEBC, I think the only thing I would appeal to Kenyans, all Kenyans, I decided to use The Nation as my prop today.
All right.
This is The Nation app. It's not another paper. There are two editorials here which are stating very clearly that the laws governing the IEBC are bad laws. And The Nation is not Jubilee. But when people sit and they're right thinking, they say those laws are bad. That is in your editorial. Now, I see the CORD leaders saying, don't touch. If you touch it, we go to the streets. I mean, it is, for me, I don't know, it's like teenagers or infantile to behave like that. I mean, throwing tantrums because something which is wrong has been pointed at you. And indeed, ODM themselves, they're in court. They went to court. They are challenging the IEBC over the 8th of December deadline. They can't cherry pick. Some laws they like, some laws they don't like. They pick the ones they like, which are convenient to them, and the ones they don't like, they want those ones to be thrown out. I've never seen anything as outrageous as that. And I think Kenyans have to be courageous enough to be able to tell these people, we better have this confrontation now than have a confrontation post the elections 2017.